can drop your lowest quiz score. So that's always an option. But remember, if you get good grades on all the quizzes, the first 4, you don't have to take the last one. So that's what I would shoot for if I were you. But that's what's going to happen. So we're going to run through chapter 6 today. That way on Thursday, you're prepared for the quiz. I will be grading your outlines that you turned in last week. There's a lot of them, bear with me. But you're basically going to get like, okay, go ahead and do your paper. Or if there are things that I'm worried about, I will talk to you about that too. But you should have those grades by the end of the week. Just bear with me. Like I said, there's like 70 of them to grade. So once those are done, you can knock out your papers and just keep moving right along. Don't forget the other assignments that you need to do in this class are coming up. So if you have not yet thought about that, it's a good time to start thinking about it. Reread the syllabus, make sure you're on track. Because like I said, everyone's getting sick right now. There's all kinds of activities. There's all kinds of stuff to do. So the likelihood that you may forget to do an assignment is a little high, and there's no late work. So no excuses. Just get it done. If you have questions, let me know. Like I said, we're going to run through chapter 6 today, but before we do, does anyone have questions? Yeah.
Is there an assignment attached to that, or just read it?
Read it, and there will be stuff that we're doing in class on it. Yeah. It should be dirt cheap to buy too, so find a used copy, read it, and share it with a friend. I think it took me like, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours to read. It's not a big old thing, but good question. Other questions? Yeah.
When we do our bus thing, do you just want a short paper as to which bus route we rode and
Follow the instructions on the syllabus. It'll tell you what I want you to include in that reflection. Okay. Awesome. Any other questions? Alrighty. So let's talk about identification of family resources. Pretty straightforward. I know you've all read the chapter already, right? Good. So this is all review. So thinking about resources, when we say that, what are the resources that you guys rely on in your own life? What are the things you rely on every day? Like, I function better because of these resources, or I have to have these resources to function. What are some things on that list? Food. Food, absolutely. Your car, okay. Especially here, public transportation is not easy. So if you don't have a car, you can't get to work, you can't get to school, okay. What else? What other resources? Running water, clean running water, hopefully. Sure. Yeah, you really don't appreciate that until one day you don't have water and you're like, oh, yeah. What else? Electricity? Sure, just utilities in general. Absolutely, we do rely on those and we take them for granted. Other resources? A cell phone. Cell phones are huge, and it's okay, you can admit that. We all rely on our cell phones, don't we? How many of you have an alarm clock? Not, I use the alarm on my phone. Everyone's hands went down. How many of you have like a separate alarm clock that you set and it goes off in the morning to wake you up? 2 of you. How many of you use an alarm on your phone? Pretty much everyone else, right? Yeah, why not have multitaskers? So you do rely on your phone. You rely on it for that, to contact people, maybe to do your homework on. Some people don't even use computers anymore. They just use their phones. We absolutely, I think we rely on that resource. What other resources that maybe aren't so tangible? Huh? Sleep. Sleep? Hopefully, yes.
Family support.
Family support, big time. Yeah, how many times have you, if you have children especially, have you needed someone to go pick up your kids because you're doing something else? Or you have a sick kid, you gotta find someone to watch them. That's a resource. You have to go to the doctor if you're sick. That's a resource. So we all rely on a lot. And a lot of them, like I said, we take for granted because most of the time we don't necessarily even realize what we're using every day until we kind of sit and think about it. And we're like, oh, wow, yeah. It takes a lot of resources to keep our lives on track. So technically defined resources are anything that you might use to achieve an end. So any tool, resource, whatever that you need to do something with. Any item which is either concrete or symbolic that can become the object of exchange among people. Hey, could you do me a favor? Could you pick this up for me? Next time you need something, I'll help you out. Hey, I've locked my keys in my car. Could you help me get it unlocked? There's all these different resources that we need, and they can be symbolic. We're talking about tangible things, but other things matter too. And when we really dig into families, we see that a lot, right? That whole like, hey, you know how I always help you out? Well, now I need your help. So resources are something that can be exploited or manipulated. They're a matter of relationship. If you see someone who's left their keys in their car, we've all done it. I mean, I'm just making fun of her. And you see them, sometimes you might think, oh, that poor girl, maybe I should stop and see if she's okay, which is the normal human decent thing to do, right? Or you might just be like, meh, someone else will help and go on your merry way. If you know the person and like the person, you might be more likely to stop, right? He doesn't like you. Yeah. So if someone doesn't stop, what do you think? You're like, you saw that I was out there stranded with my keys locked in my car and you didn't stop to help me? You must not think very much about me. So we really attribute a lot to this instead of thinking like, oh, maybe he had somewhere else to be or, you know, whatever the reason is. And I'm not making excuses. He should have stopped and helped. But yeah, we use resources as a matter of relationship. They're definitely things that we sometimes keep balances of, we kind of keep track of because we really do, that's all we have is our resources. So we have to decide how we're going to spend them, how we're going to use them, who we're going to share them with. If we don't do that, then we start to lose relationships. So we have resources that are based on value. Things are only worth something if there's someone to buy it. That's what I like to tell my son because he likes to collect stuff. Like we went to In-N-Out this weekend because we were in Phoenix and he brought home an empty In-N-Out cup. He's like, maybe someday In-N-Out's gonna go out of business and this is gonna be a collector's item. And I was like, no, it's literally just trash. But in his mind, there may be some value. This may be a resource later on in life that when he's destitute, he could sell his In-N-Out cup and pay his bills with. People think that about all kinds of things though, right? It's an investment. I have a really good friend. We talk a lot because he's got probably 60 guns and doesn't ever go out and shoot them. He's like, well, they're investments. For what? Because if you're not using them, if they're sitting on a shelf, if they're collecting dust, are they truly a resource? Only if someone's willing to buy them. Otherwise, they're just dust collectors. So we tend to attribute value to things. The market attributes value to things. And then we have to decide, is this a valuable resource or not? What's this on the left? On y'all's right? Coffee. Coffee is valuable, right? We pay $6 at Starbucks for it. Diamonds. You know why diamonds are so popular? Those dirty marketers again. They convinced us that diamonds were what people should have, and so they drove the price up of them. In reality, they're much more rare gems that are probably should be valued a lot higher than they are. But the marketers got a hold of these diamonds and said, hey, there's so few of these. You got to get one and you got to get a good one because there's not going to be enough to go around. And we drove the price up. So the less available, and we talked about this last week, a resource is, the more demand there can be for it and the more we can charge for it. We also talked about lobsters last week, right? How that was at the first Thanksgiving. Lobsters are like considered the cockroaches of the sea. But we pay $30 for them now because we say, hey, lobsters are rare. They should be super expensive. There's huge demand for them. And guess what? People did that. So now lobsters are a treat. We don't eat lobster every night at dinner. And especially not here in the desert, I know. But even on the East Coast, even, you know, where there is water, they're considered something because we've driven this market. We've said, these are something that's rare. These are something that's a treat. If you could just walk out to your local ditch and pick up some lobsters, wouldn't be as big a deal, right? So that's when we think about resources. When we think about value of something, it's really helpful to think about, why is this valuable? What is it that makes this valuable? If we're running out of it, that's one thing. Did y'all know there's a helium shortage? Did I maybe say that before? I feel like I never know who I'm like my dad. I'm just gonna tell you the same story 10 times, just bear with me. But we were running out of helium worldwide. This is kind of a thing. At some point, there's not gonna be any more of it. So now that we know that, we know like, hey, eventually there's not gonna be more helium. Guess what happens to the price of helium? It goes up. And then we have to start thinking about like, should we do something to protect it? Should I really just squirt it into my mouth and make funny noises with it? Is that a good use of this resource or not? And I'll be honest, I don't know a whole lot of other things that you do with helium besides blow up balloons and make funny voices. But maybe it's something that's used in medical technology. I don't know. I'm just saying, when resources become less available, prices tend to go up. And there's also a psychological feeling of, I need to get this. You know, we talked about that last week too. I need to get this before it's all gone because then I'm going to miss out. So different things that we need to think about when we talk about resource availability. First, utility. What is a purpose of the resource? It has to have a purpose to be useful. If the purpose is just to look pretty, the purpose is just to look pretty. But there has to be a reason for it. If there's not, if you cannot imagine what to do with something, do you value it as a resource? Probably not. You're like, here, you can have it. I don't need it because I don't even know what it does. Accessibility. It must be available. If it's like, oh man, I've got $1 million in the bank. Is that accessible? Yes. Can I get it today? No. There's probably going to be a 3 to 5 day wait before I can withdraw that kind of money. So how available our resources are is important. Cash money is always available if you have it. Money that's tied up in stocks or investments, there's going to be a delay getting to that money. So how available, how accessible something is also makes it a different type of resource. Transferability. Can I give it to someone else who needs it? Can someone else use it? If I go to a different state, can I still use it? If I go to a different country, can I still use it? That's something I have to think about too. My friend who's a gun collector. If you move to Europe, can you take those with you? Nope. If you move to other states, can you take them with you? Maybe not. There's a lot of ones in there that are a little questionable because they're free bands. So that's a thing too. Is it a resource if I can't take it with me? Interchangeability. Can I exchange this for something else? Can I trade? Can I say like, hey, I'll give you this for that? Is there going to be a way to do that? Or is it just, again, something that doesn't really do anything? And then manageable. Is it something that we can plan for, we can use in some way, make a plan about, and a realistic one? So is this cup, talking about my son's In-N-Out cup, is there a purpose for it? Sure, if you put a drink in it. That's the purpose of the cup. His purpose is nostalgia mostly. But also, you know, maybe someday someone's going to want to buy this cup from me. He watches a lot of the, what's the one where they go around buying stuff now? American Pickers. Yeah, so someone's going to come pick this cup one day and he's going to be rich. Is it available? Yep, sitting right on his dresser anytime he wants it. Transferability. Can he take it with him? Sure, until it gets mashed or the dogs eat it or something like that. Interchangeable. Can he exchange it for other things? not in its current state. He can't trade this cup for something else. He possibly could sell the cup, so trade it for money and then use the money for something else. But right now, that's not a thing. And manageable. In his plan, is there a way that he can put this resource to work for him? No, there's not. But someday there might be. So when we talk about our assets, when we talk about our resources, this is what we want to think about. Like, how valuable is this really? Is this something that other people would find valuable? These are all tangible things mostly, but it also, again, can be intangible things like time, because time is a resource, right? Let's run through this with time. Must have purpose and be useful. What is the purpose of whatever activities we're spending our time on? Is there a true purpose? Is it obligation to family? Is it trying to not hurt someone's feelings by going to their birthday party? Is it coming to class? Is it whatever? So what's the purpose? Is it available? Do you have enough time to do that? That's debatable. Is it available where it's needed? If I really have to do something on Tuesday at 11 a.m., is that time available for use or not? Probably not, because I'm here. Can exchange it for other things. Well, I'm going to give up this activity to do this one. I'm going to put my time into this one. That's what we're looking at there. And then do we have a plan for managing our time? Probably not as good as we should, but that's what, when we talk about intangible resources, what we mean, because they're just as valuable, sometimes more. You know the expression, time is money? That comes from somewhere, because all of our time takes away. If we're doing this, we can't be doing this. So it's really a matter of budgeting and figuring out our time, a resource. Make sense? All righty. So there's a couple different resource theories. We'll run through pretty quickly. So people try to meet needs in the context of social interaction, relationships. Relationships take time and effort. They take resources. Until you've got a really good friendship, you got to spend time with your friend. Because if you don't, the person thinks, well, you're probably not that good a friend if you never make time for me. How can we even get to be close if we don't spend time together? But we use our resources to meet those needs. Some people do it the wrong way. Some people buy a lot of presents or whatever they've decided to do to try to foster that relationship. Because relationships are important. We're social beings. We all need them. So one theory says that's what we try to do. We're investing our resources to foster social interactions and relationships. The types of resources that are exchanged within those relationships: love, status, information, money, goods, and services. So these are the different types of resources that are in relationships. Do all relationships have all of these resources? Probably not, but a couple of them, right? Can you think of a relationship that doesn't have one of these? That doesn't involve the exchange of any of these resources? Probably not. You may think of a relationship that doesn't involve goods and services being exchanged, but there probably is information or status or something else going on there. So these are the resources that we have in relationships. And there's an amount of kind of keeping track and keeping score that sometimes happens. Because too often when someone feels like I am pouring everything into this person, if they don't feel that reciprocity that they're getting something back, is the relationship going to succeed? Probably not. So human resources, this is a whole field. HR is the person who you get in trouble with at work if you do something wrong. It's the group that protects you if you do something, or if someone does something to you. But we've kind of taken it to be this like the office type joke. But in reality, we all have human resources that we're using every day that are unique to people. Cognitive abilities and physical abilities are part of that. This is how, when we talk about robots taking over, This is the area where we're trying to convince ourselves like robots couldn't replace humans because they don't have these same characteristics in the same way. That used to be a lot more clear and certain. Now we have robots that are beginning to generate thoughts and think for themselves. So at this point, maybe this will become a thing of the past. But for now, we say that humans are the only entities that have the same level of thought, except maybe the apes. They think pretty much like we do, and the dolphins, I guess, are pretty smart. But generally, we're pretty smart, right? We figured things out that other creatures have not. And physically, we have great capabilities. So when we talk about that in terms of human capital, so capital is assets, right? We talk about a person's competencies, the things you're good at, the things you know a lot about, knowledge, personality, that all come together to help you perform labor that then can be marketed for economic value. So, education and experience. Going to college increases your human capital if you pay attention and learn something. Even if you don't, it helps a little. But education, experience, those are the things that we develop as humans that help us to be marketable. It's not the only things. There's also just magnetism. That personality can go really far. Have you ever met someone who's really bad at their job, doesn't know what they're doing, but everyone loves them? They've learned how to market their human capital. Their dazzling personality has kind of got them through and covered up the fact that they don't have a whole lot of education experience. So that does happen. But what we're looking at when we're trying to decide if we're going to hire someone, we're going to try to decide if we want to partner with someone. What abilities do they have? What behaviors do they demonstrate? How much effort do they put in? And how much time do they have? It's hard to imagine an employer if you went to them and said, you know, I have about 5 hours a week when I can work. It's hard to imagine an employer jumping all over that unless it's maybe tutoring or something. But you have to be able to provide these things in order to be employable. If you're like, you know what, I don't know how to do this job, I don't have the physical strength to do this job, but I'll be here on time every day, I'll be pleasant and friendly, do you think you're going to get the job? Well, maybe, because I've seen that happen, but probably not, right? So when we think about resources, we want to specifically focus in on human resources. What are the ways that we sell ourselves? What are the ways that we provide and contribute to the economic gain? Because that's really where you come to college for, right? To get those skills. Some people will tell you, I've been in this job for 20-some years and I've done really well, but now my company has changed the requirements that everyone who works here has to have a college degree. So I'm getting a college degree. I don't plan on learning a whole lot because I already know what I'm doing, but I need the piece of paper. That's a very real statement. Because we, at some point, some companies, some agencies, whatever it is, has decided like, we need someone to be able to substantiate their education. We need to be able to see that diploma to say they've completed it. These days, we see that a lot with college degrees, right? You may not work in the field that you get your degree in, and that may not matter as long as you have a degree, because that says something. What does having a college degree say? Hold on, she raised her hand.
Well, yeah, that's
Say it again?
pretty much what she said, that you can pick something's benefit,
Yes.
that you have a certain level of intelligence, like you can get things done, figure things out in a variety of different subjects.
Yeah. So there's that comprehensive piece that you've learned about multiple things, because almost all universities still do require you to have some general education, that you've persevered and completed something that you started. That alone is a big one. That you can figure things out, that you have been hopefully taught some skills to figure things out, or at least figured out who to cheat off of and copy from, because even that honestly is a skill, right? But yeah, it says something, and people are looking for that. And we have this debate a lot in society from people saying, college degrees shouldn't matter, but they do matter. They shouldn't be the end all be all, absolutely not. But for a lot of things, they really do matter. So we say, this is something you can do, this is what you can get from it. Go to school, get a better job. It doesn't work that way in other areas of human capital though, right? When we think about relationships, there's not like a training course for relationships except the classes we teach. But if you don't have any exposure to this, you don't get all of these things. That's another reason this field is so important. Family studies, family science, because we talk about economics and stuff like that, but we also talk about relationships. There's such an overlap between your success at work and your happiness at home, your success in school and what's going on at home. All of those things matter. So when we look at it purely from an economic perspective, sometimes we miss that. But we're getting to a place in society now where we realize, like, hey, we want our employees to have happy lives, because if they don't, their work life suffers. That's why we have employee assistance programs. That's why we have agencies bringing in guest speakers to talk about stress management, time management, bring in masseuse, something like that, because we're starting to realize human capital only improves when we attend to the complete person, not just the person they are from 8 to 5 every day. So it's a big area of growth, and quite frankly, it's a big area for people in this field to be able to provide the consultation and the resources to help everyone, employers especially, understand that. So another resource that we have, energy. We've talked about that. If you don't have the energy, if you're too tired, if you're not getting enough sleep, you may finish a task. Maybe. You may not. You may not even have the energy to do it. But are you going to do it well? Maybe not, because you're not able to devote all of your resources to it because you're trying to stay awake. Individuals invest their resources for many different reasons. Why do we give our time? Why do we give our talents? Why do we do things at all? Commitment to a group, because I don't want to let my teammates down, because I don't want to let my friends down. That's a big one, right? Turn that off. Because we care about a group. Besides just like, well, I said I would, so I should. I want to, because I want the group to be successful, because I like it. I'd like us to keep going. So that's another reason I might want to. I want to be the best. I want to win. That's absolutely part of it too. Or I want to get some sort of return on my investment, something's coming back to me. So if I feel like, even though I hate this and it's miserable, in the long run, it'll help me out, I might be likely to invest my resources. So for example, we have here at the university, all universities mostly have what's called promotion and tenure, which basically sets the criteria for how you're going to be evaluated if you want to be promoted. And so every once in a while, we have to sit down and go through the P&T document and talk about, okay, what do we want our faculty members to do in order to be promoted? And that's kind of a big thing, because promotion comes with money, it comes with job security, there's value to being promoted. Who should be involved in that process? Everyone, right? I'm considered senior faculty. I've been here a really long time, and I've been as promoted as I can be. Should I be saying what we expect from people who need to get promoted or tenured? Not really, because I don't care. I've already been there and done that. So I might be able to provide perspective and guidance and suggestions, but the people who really need to be doing it are the ones who are gonna have to get promoted. Because if they get to set the expectations, if they get to set the guidelines and say, this is what's reasonable, they're gonna have a lot greater buy-in, and they're gonna be more likely to do it. If I get to say, I could be the one who says like, well, it was really hard for me, so I wanna make it really hard on you. Or, oh, that's just not good enough, and I could hold them back. So when we're talking about resources, we also need to think about who is investing these resources. You got to bring everyone to the table. Otherwise, I could make it really hard because it's just fun for me to watch, but it doesn't impact me directly at all. So when we talk about return on investment, I have 0 return on investment for current people who need to go up for promotion. I've already done that. So I don't have a whole lot of reason to go to those meetings unless I just genuinely care. I want the program to be solid. I want the degree to be solid, something like that. But that's a big decision for me to make. How much do I care? How much time is it going to take? So anytime we're asked to participate in any sort of group or team or something, we're thinking about this. We're trying to figure out, how does this all work together? Same thing when you think about sports teams. Why do people get on sports teams originally, like initially? When my 10-year-old decides he wants to play football, what is his motivation? Why did you guys get on a sports team when you were younger? Social, right? My friends are doing it. It looks like fun. Okay. What if you're like, I don't know anybody in this town? Maybe it's a way to make friends. Sure. So I join a sports team because I want to make friends when I'm young. Or maybe because I truly love the sport. Like, it's just, I have so much joy, because there are definitely team sports that are a little more individual. But for whatever reason, I decide, like, I'm going to be an athlete. I'm going to play a sport. How do I get that commitment to the group? Well, I signed up and said I'd be there, so I'll be there. What about caring about the group? Do you have to care about the team? Do you? What happens if you don't?
You're not gonna put as much into it.
You might not put as much into it, right? I kind of be like, well, I mean, I'm still going to get recruited. I'm still going to get scouted. So I don't really need to worry about making them look good, right? Maybe, maybe not. But yeah, if I don't care about the group, I may not try as hard. I may not be to practice on time. I may not do what I'm supposed to do. If I do, my level of resources that I'm going to put into the team go up. Same thing if I want to win or not. Most athletes want to win. Because if you don't, why compete? Why not just do intramurals or something like that? They decide, like, I want to do, even if it's not winning. We're not necessarily winning bowl games around here. But we still want to see some sort of performance. I want to improve my personal best. I want to raise my own stats. I want to be able to position myself as a leader on the team, things like that. And then the return on the investment. Maybe that's a college scholarship. Maybe you get drafted. Maybe you get to play professionally. Maybe you just have a really, really good time. But all of these things are going to determine how many resources you put into what you're doing. Because if you don't really care much, if you're just there because your parents are making you, or if you're just there because someone told you this is going to get you a college scholarship, are you really going to put everything into it? Probably not. Our time and our efforts are so valuable that we have to protect ourselves. And a lot of times we don't even realize we're doing it, but we're like, I'm going to get to practice a little late today. I'm going to operate at about 70% because I can get away with it. And the investment goes down. So it's something that we need to think about in those contexts too, not just economically, but also interpersonally. More specifically, talking about economy, economic resources, some are acquired. Some of our resources we get because we work for them. In some way or another, we work for them. We talk a lot, especially during political season, about a living wage. What is a living wage? Yeah.
The ability to make or be paid enough to cover your bills and your necessities.
Yeah. The ability for your wages to help you live, right? Making enough money that you can afford housing and food and transportation and the things that are on that bottom level of hierarchy of need. A lot of people don't earn a living wage. We know those stories, right? They work, depending on where you live, they work 40, 60, 80 hours a week, and they still have to have 2 roommates to be able to afford an apartment. Or they still have to rely on food stamps or handouts or something like that to be able to eat because they just don't make enough money. And we're talking about necessities, not things they want. These are needs. So there's a big discussion about that. What is a living wage? How do we establish a living wage? It's hard in New Mexico because if you make minimum wage here in Las Cruces, you're probably all right. Not great, but all right. But if you make minimum wage for New Mexico in Santa Fe, you're not all right because prices are so much higher there. So it's a really complicated to figure out. That's why places, I think like Santa Fe, have their own minimum wage that's specific to their city and county, because that's a big thing. We need to be able to give people enough money to survive and to live. They need to be able to work and pay the bills, because otherwise there's not a whole lot of motivation to work. If I'm gonna bust my butt and be exhausted all the time and still not be able to afford housing, food, things like that, how motivated am I gonna be to go to work? No, it's not there. So we're looking for that. We've gotta have that. Wages versus salary. Do y'all understand the difference between those? What's a wage? It's an hourly rate, basically. It's how much you get for the time that you work. So it's whatever minimum wage is here now. Does anyone know?
And Cruces.
Yep, New Mexico. What is, can you look that up?
About New Mexico, there's just
$9.25, something like that?
Cruces.
Okay, so we got a minimum wage of $9.25. Let's say you get a job at minimum wage. You know you're gonna make this much for every hour that you work. So the more hours you work, the more money you bring in. Versus salary, which says you get this much money a year and the hours don't matter. So your salary is $70,000 a year. That means in 12 months, you're gonna earn $70,000 a year, whether you work 20 hours a week or 40 hours a week. And of course, there's some rules in there, so people try not to take advantage of that, but that's what the difference there. Salaried wages are a little more consistent. You can anticipate how much money you're gonna earn every month. If you're on wages, if you're earning minimum wage or some sort of wage, even if it's a little bit above minimum wage, you're only gonna get that money if you're working. So some months, if you have a couple of sick days and you don't have sick leave, or if it's a shorter month, because some months have 28 days, some have 31, your check's gonna vary a lot more. You can't always anticipate what you're gonna be bringing in. So that's one difference between a wage and a salary. Another one has to do with the different value of benefits that come along with your job. Employers provide resources to their employees to try to keep them healthy and happy sometimes. So if you, especially if you're a salary employee, you probably have access to health insurance. You may have to pay a lot for it, but you don't have to pay as much as you would if your employer didn't offer it. Here at NMSU, depending on your income, NMSU pays anywhere from 70% of your insurance to 30% of your insurance each month, and you pay the rest. Things like retirement accounts. All these different types of resources we'll talk about in more detail later on, but all these things matter. So when I talk with the master's level students about getting their job after they graduate, they're gonna be a licensed marriage and family therapist. They're gonna make some money. But let's say they go to one agency and the agency offers them $40,000 a year, but no benefits. So you can have $40,000 a year, but you need to pay for your own insurance, you need to pay for your own supervision, you're not gonna have paid time off, whatever. Versus another agency that offers them $35,000 a year. But they pay for their insurance, they pay for their supervision, they give them paid time off. Those benefits cost money too, probably quite a bit. So ballpark it, let's say the company's paying this $35,000 a year salaried person, they're paying about $15,000 in benefits for that person every year. When you measure it out, that's the better deal, even though it's $5,000 less in your paycheck. So it's not always just as straightforward as how much am I getting paid? That's really important. You want to get paid a lot, but that's not always the only option, because think about, well, if I move up to Santa Fe and they're going to pay me $40,000 a year, that's $5,000 more than I could get here. But how much more is my housing going to cost in Santa Fe? How much more is my food going to cost in Santa Fe? Things like that. So that's really when we think about this, that value added stuff comes into play a lot when we're talking about salaried employees. Someone can be really proud of their salary, and that's awesome, but how much of that is going to things that another employee might have from their employer? So thinking about that. Gender differences we will most definitely talk about. There's still a glass ceiling. There's still inherent differences in the salaries that are being paid to men and women, but we'll talk about that more specifically later on. So those are all acquired economic resources. Then we have the inherited economic resources. These are the ones that come from our families, that we inherit from someone else. We didn't earn, but was given to us as a birthright. And then, you know, there's tax implications for that. There's a lot of complications in terms of inheritance, in terms of who gets what, how much. Do I leave everything to one child and leave the rest out in the cold, or do I split it equally among my children? Things like that. But in general, those are the ways we gain economic resources. We either earn them or we get them as an inheritance right. Environmentally, these are other resources that we have. And we talked a little bit about this already. You guys mentioned clean water, things like that. You know, renewable resources. Those are the ones that we can use over and over again, that we're not going to run out of at some point. Versus the non-renewable resources that once it's gone, it's gone. I mentioned helium. Once it's gone, it's gone. That is a natural resource that, unless we find more of, will be gone at some point. What are some renewable resources that you can think of? Lumber, can grow more trees. What else? Cotton, we can grow more cotton. Wool, things like that. What are those non-renewable ones? Water? Can we make water? Nope. We can clean it up, but we can't make it. But I mean, go to Nevada sometime or Arizona and talk to them about droughts. I mean, here even locally talk about drought conditions and see how the farmers and the ranchers feel about it. Because that is a concern. We could run out of water.
Oil and gas.
Oil and gas, sure. Those are non-renewable. When we're out, we're out. And when there's a boom, it feels like it's gonna last forever. But when there's a crash and all of a sudden, oh, we don't have enough of this anymore, that becomes a problem. So yeah, we know this, we talk about this. There's a huge thing right now that little 13, 14-year-old girl who's kind of schooling the world about, you know, renewable resources and saving the planet and things like that. This is a huge conversation that y'all need to be part of. When we kind of talk about this too, think about the average age of a politician. They're pretty old, right? Who needs to be involved in these decisions about the environment? Is it the old guys who are going to die soon? Is it maybe the kids who are going to have to live in this world? That's really where the discussion goes. That's why this 13-year-old is making such headlines right now, because she's a young kid who's saying like, hey guys, you need to care about my future. You need to care about the planet you're leaving for me. So that's when I talk about, again, those resources, who's involved in that decision. It needs to be the people who are going to be most impacted from it. That's the whole idea of elective representative government, is that they're supposed to speak for the needs of the population, whether or not they do. But this is something that's still really divisive. We know climate change is real, even though people want to say it's not. Like, science has pretty much demonstrated this is a real thing. But there are still people who say, no, it's not, or it's just not important enough. So these questions down here. Nothing should allow the environment to be compromised. A lot of people may agree with that, but a lot of people may not. They might say, well, some things are worth compromising the environment for. Because if not, we're going to have to give up our buses and our trains and our industry. Are we willing to do that? Probably not. Should we have less restriction on industry because we need the resources? These are the kinds of questions that people are wrestling with. Hopefully, you're able to kind of see both sides to that argument. Because neither of those is right, but neither of those is wrong. There's gray area, there's middle ground in all of these. And right now, it's also a political game. Who's going to control the economic resources? Who gets to say what the oil in the Middle East does or doesn't do? Who gets to control that and produce that? So environmental resources are absolutely something that are valuable and that are becoming even more economic and even more monetized as we go along and start to worry that we might run out of them. Socially, we also have resources. Social capital. So those people, you know, the people who are like super fun and everyone likes them. But then like when it comes down to it, you don't call them for anything because they're really probably not going to show up or they're not going to be emotionally available. Those people are dealing with social capital issues. We all deal with social capital issues. They're connections among individuals. They're the ways that we can get away with not being a great friend sometimes because we've been a great friend for so long and our friends understand and they're like, I get it. You're having a rough time right now. You don't have to be there for me. It's those kinds of things. Reciprocity does become important. At some point, if you feel like it's a one-sided relationship, if you feel like you're putting in all the work, you're putting in all the effort, you're really the one even keeping the friendship going. You're the one who makes the calls. You're the one who checks in with the other person and invites them out. At some point, you start to think, how come they never do that? How come they never invite me out? How come they never start the texting? Whatever it is. Then you start to think this is not a reciprocal relationship. Maybe I don't want it anymore. Collectively owned versus individually owned. So social capital can't exist in a vacuum. You can't have your own social capital. You can't say I'm the best and I'm the most wonderful friend in the world if there aren't friends of yours to kind of back it up. So it's not something that you can construct on your own. It comes from other people. Within the family, it's developed and fostered through communication and through family function things that really help people to do things together, family reunions, Sunday night dinners, whatever it is. And outside the family, you get it from your communities, you get it from the programs that you participate in and you're involved in, you get it from volunteering. But basically, we can't ignore the fact that social capital matters. If we don't have networks established, if we don't have friendships or relationships or working relationships, we don't have a whole lot of social capital. So then when we lock our keys out, people are going to think, man, she's kind of a jerk. I'm not going to stop and help her. Versus, you know what? I know she would stop for me, so I'm going to stop for her. Or maybe they think, you know, when I was stranded, they didn't come help me, so why should I help in exchange? So these things are big, and we don't even always notice it. A lot of times we don't even think about it until there's a problem. But it's very much a resource. That's why we use endorsements, right? That's why we have athletes who are getting these deals to sell tennis shoes or cereal or whatever it is they're marketing, because people say, hey, this person has a lot of social capital. They're influencers. They have millions of followers on Twitter and Instagram. So if people see them with our product, they're going to want that product too. So we market that. We take advantage of people's social capital and we get the word out. And then, of course, the opposite happens. If you're familiar with what's going on right now in the NFL with Antonio Brown, he was rising high. All kinds of endorsement deals, all kinds of really amazing things. He just got acquired by the Patriots, making billions of dollars. And then all of a sudden we find out that perhaps there's been some sexual misconduct. So now he's under investigation for that. You know how quickly his social capital dropped? He's no longer in the NFL. He no longer has any endorsement deals. And we'll wait and see what happens now, because he hasn't been actually formally charged. He hasn't been found guilty. But socially, he's a pariah. No one wants their name associated with Antonio Brown right now, because that means that you're associating with someone who may be a sex offender. So that's one of the like national stage ways that we see social capital playing out. So it can be used for good and it can be used for bad, just depending. How we measure our resources, we're looking for equitable exchange. Basically, we want to know that we are getting something of equal value in exchange. Otherwise, what's the point? We want to know that we're getting something fair, that what we're paying is worth it, that there's value in that. But that's a really hard thing to determine because it all depends. My boys are both in Boy Scouts, which means that they sell popcorn every year. Have any of y'all ever bought Cub Scout popcorn? It's really expensive. You get like a little bag like this of caramel corn and it's $10 for maybe like $1 worth of popcorn. People look at the prices and they're like, holy cow, that's ridiculously expensive. And it absolutely is. But people still buy the popcorn. Why?
Support the Boy Scouts.
To support the kids, absolutely. Because this little guy wants to go to camp, and the only way he can go to camp is if he sells enough popcorn. So I'm willing to pay triple, quadruple what I would if I just went to the grocery store, because I can convince myself what I'm really doing is paying for this little guy to go to camp. I never once want people to believe, oh no, I'm getting $20 worth of popcorn. That's not how fundraisers work. So just because it's not fair in terms of you're getting value for what you pay, it's fair in other ways because what you're really basically doing is making a donation and getting a small token of appreciation. That's how we do things. That's why we pay at fundraisers for things that we could get on our own for way cheaper. When they have the spaghetti meals, that used to be a thing. It's not so much anymore. Enchilada plates, things like that. You're gonna go, you're gonna pay $7 for a plate of food that maybe costs $2 to produce. Why are you doing it? It's not because you're just really hungry. You could get that food somewhere else cheaper. You're doing it because you want to help contribute to something, to some sort of charity, to some sort of something to help someone else. But in exchange, you still feel like you're getting something out of it. A lot of people will walk up and say, I don't want any popcorn, but here's $20. That happens a lot because they don't want the popcorn, but they want to support the boys. That's what we see happening here. So we can't just look at this from an economic perspective because it doesn't make much sense to buy Boy Scout popcorn. Economically, it's a loss. But if you think of it as I'm helping children, I'm supporting their causes, things like that, it feels pretty good, even if it's not economically the right thing. But then, of course, there's tax write-offs. So it gets really complicated. But that's what we're talking about when we're talking about equitable exchange. It's not necessarily this for that and dollar amounts matter. There's also that emotional amount that can matter too. And that's something we really have to keep in mind because sometimes our emotions will allow us to spend more than we should because we want to help so bad. So that's, again, it could easily be manipulated, but that's what it's for. That's why we have these thought processes to think about, like, this is not wise economically. I probably shouldn't buy popcorn from every single Cub Scout that I see. But at the same time, if I'm able to, I have the money and I'm able to donate it, maybe that's something I'm going to choose to do. In addition to that, theory of relative resources. So whoever has the most resources has the most power. And that's just how it works. It's not always money though. It's other resources too. So what we're looking at here is how we find the balance. How do we manage the balance, let's say with a stay-home parent. One parent works, one parent stays home. I'm going through this with a couple of clients right now who are getting divorced. Mom's been home since the kids were born. 12 years now. Mom worked, college degree, decided to put her career on hold till the kids were kind of, high school age. Like that was something the couple agreed on. Okay, I will work, you will stay home. This is what we want. That works awesome until now there's a divorce and we're trying to figure out Who gets the money? Who's entitled to the money? Is it the person who earned it? Is it everyone in the couple? How do we figure that out? That's super complicated. So that's what we're trying to figure out here. How do we balance that? How does a court look at someone who says, you stayed home, you did not bring income into the family? How do they decide what percentage of that family's net worth they deserve? It's really complicated. Those are the kinds of things when we're talking about relative resources. It depends, is basically what we're saying that. It depends on a lot of different factors. Did the couple agree that mom would stay home, or did mom just quit her job one day? Did mom spend all the money and dad just brought it in and didn't know? Who managed it? Who gets the retirement? All those things become important at some point, and they probably should be important long before you get divorced, because then maybe you won't be as likely to get divorced, but that's different. Resource allocation and use. How we use our resources. We exchange one for another. We produce more. We consume them. We save or we invest, or we protect or we exploit. Let's really hone in on save or invest. That's a big thing. And I know at a certain age, it's hard to even think about saving money because you don't have money to save, right? At some point you're like, yeah, okay, I'll start saving money as soon as I get a job that pays me something. But what we really have to do is change that mindset and help people understand saving needs to happen beginning. Pay yourself first. You need to save money. If you make $200 a week, save 20 bucks. If you make $200 a month, save 20 bucks. Save 10%. And that's just a really good habit to get into. Because then when you make $70,000, you save $7,000. So always making that a priority. It feels really hard to do, but people don't do it. There's a temptation to just invest your money versus just putting in a savings account that's going to have a low return of interest. I could buy Bitcoin right now, and I could be rich by tomorrow until it tanks, because it was tanking this weekend, and all of a sudden balances go down, down, down. So having a conversation with people when they're young about how are you going to use your resources. One of the things that everyone needs to do is save or invest them. And this is not just money, this is also your time. How are you going to save time? How are you going to streamline your day so that you do save some of that valuable time? Walmart Groceries started today delivering to your home. For a very small fee, you can have someone do your grocery shopping for you, bring it to your house. They won't unload it for you, like into your refrigerator, but I'm sure someday they will. So then last night I'm doing my Walmart order. I've always just done grocery pickup because, again, don't have time to go to the grocery store, and I spend too much money when I do. But then I think, okay, I could get it delivered for like $8. In the grand scheme of things, if $8 saves me 2 hours of time, and I charge $95 an hour for my clients, probably a pretty good return, right? So it's not necessarily about not spending money. It's about spending money wisely to free up more time, because I can use that time for other things. I am a huge proponent of people cleaning my house that aren't me. I pay $80 every 2 weeks for someone to come clean my house. And I understand not everyone can do that. I'm very fortunate that I can do that. But the way I see it, if I get to go do stuff on Saturday and Sunday with my kids, if we get to go camping, if we can go to the park, if we can just sit around and watch football all day, that's worth $80. So I make that investment. I decide I'm going to save time. I'm going to buy that time to spend with my family by having someone else do this task for me, because I don't have time to do it during the week, so it would be my weekends. That's when we clean, right, on our weekends. And that's the only time we're all together as a family. Let's go ahead and scrub toilets today. No. Let's go ahead and have someone else scrub our toilets, and we can go to the park. Sounds better, right? I know not everyone can do that, but when we're able to budget, when we're able to figure out, maybe it's just once a month. Maybe you don't have that dirty a house, I don't know. But like, that's what we're talking about here. How are we using our resources? How are we saving or investing our other resources besides finances? for the bigger payback, because in the long run, the bigger payback is the time with my family versus the times cleaning the toilets. It's nice to have clean toilets, but if I have to choose that, I'm probably not going to do it. Just put a toilet paper on the seat. I don't know. I'm not great about it. But that's what we're talking about here. When we're talking about how we use them and how we negotiate that and decide how we're going to do that. Resourcefulness, how can we figure out ways to meet our needs effectively? How can we figure out, maybe we want to use coupons. Maybe we want to go, that used to be a big thing. It's not as much now, but like coupon clipping, extreme couponing. How can I make it work for me? The challenge with that, just real briefly, is that a lot of times you buy stuff you don't need because it's on sale or because you have a coupon for it. So that's not being resourceful. Resourcefulness is using coupons for the things you were already going to buy, or figuring out how to get them for cheaper, or figuring out how to get someone else to get them for you so that you don't have to spend your energy doing that. That's what we talk about there. Relationship power and resource allocation. This is huge. We call, there's a theory called the principle of least, what do I call it? Did you look up that other thing, by the way? Minimum wage? Yeah. Is it $9.25?
It's 9 statewide and then it goes up in January.
Okay. So right now minimum wage is $9, but it's going up in January. Cool, thank you. Principle of least interest is the theory I was talking about. Basically, it says the person who has the least interest in staying in the relationship has the most power. Think about that. If I don't care if we're together next week, I have all the power because you do care. So you're going to do everything you possibly can to keep me. So it's kind of this, when we talk about relationship power, that's what we're talking about. If one of the people is involved and wants this relationship to continue, they're going to overperform to try to convince the other person to stay. So it's a power play that we have, and it's all based on our resources. I don't have to care. I don't have to be interested. I can play hard to get. I cannot text you back. I can do all these things to make you try harder. So we absolutely use our resources in that way too. Not always deliberately, but that can be a way to manipulate. So you can kind of read through this. I know you read through it in the book already, but basically it's something we want to think about. That's what I really want you to kind of recognize and help families to understand. We want to think about how we're using our resources. And we want to think about it more than in terms of just money. I tell my clients all the time, like, who's cleaning your house? And if they're like, well, I can't afford to have someone else do it, so I'm doing it. I'm like, okay, let's really break that down. Because again, I get it. Not everyone can afford $80, but let's look at how you're spending your time and how you're spending your money. If you were able to do without something, could you then have someone clean your house and free up entire weekends for your family? Like, is that not worth it? And a lot of times it is. And a lot of times you can get people to do it for cheaper than $80. Like, you could probably get someone to clean your house for $40. You know, I don't know the going rate, but I would guess that you probably could if you're resourceful. So when we really want families to think about how are we allocating our resources, not just our money, but our time, but our emotional energy. Because if I'm always working overtime, if I'm picking up extra shifts and the money's really good, and it feels good to have extra money, and finally we can breathe a little bit, we can have a little bit of a savings account, that might be totally worth it to me. But if my family's like, you don't get home at night until we're already asleep, and when you do come home, you're always tired and grumpy, or, you know, we don't see you on the weekends because you're picking up extra shifts. In the long run, how's that going to pay off for me? I'll probably have a pretty decent bank account, but what will my relationships be like? So that's what we have to talk about families. It's not just about money. I know money's important. We all could do with more of it. But at what cost? That's really what we're thinking about here, and that's what we want to help other people think about. How am I going to make this money work for me, but not have it own me? basically. Make sense? All right. And then we'll talk about this a little more. I'm sure you talk about it in other classes too. But basically, when we talk about equity, equality, and need, that's a pretty complicated thing. I like this picture best, and instead of just talking about it. So this is baseball game. Here's the fence, and here's the kids at the fence. So equality says everyone gets the same. Everyone gets the same stool to stand on. That's fair, right? It's fair. Equity says everyone gets what they need. Does this tall boy need a block to stand on? No, he can see just fine on his own. What about little guy? He can't see anything if he only has one block. But if tall boy gives him his block, guess what? He can see too. And this is a tough concept because we want things to be fair. That's like a big thing in our world. That's not fair. That's something that we really try to teach kids. We're going to share it equally. We're going to cut it in half, things like that. That's not realistic. If we get to an equity stance, if within our family we can say, we're going to give everyone what they need, then we can all enjoy the game together. And that is a super complicated concept because it's not fair. And I guarantee you, if I got 2 blocks and my sister only got 1 or didn't get a block, she'd be pissed about it. Don't matter that she can already see the game. It's not fair. We should both have the same. So this mentality, you'll see in families all the time when you're talking about resources. When we're trying to figure out, we've got this pot to work with. We got to figure out how to feed everyone. Do we give the 2-year-old the same amount of food we give the 11-year-old? No. Why would we do that? The 2-year-old's going to get sick. They're going to eat so much. But instead, what often happens is mom doesn't eat, and she gives the kids equal portions. So this is really a big thing. And we talk about it when we talk about multiculturalism. We talk about it in a lot of different contexts. But within the context of this class, what we're really talking about is how a family distributes their resources. And are they going for equality, which is fair, or are they going for equity, which lets everyone participate? And I guarantee you, if you ask a lot of families, they're gonna be like, nope, we want the first one. Sucks that you should be taller. I don't know what to tell you. If you were taller, you could see over the fence. Maybe you should go like this so you could see. Because tall guy doesn't care, he can see. So this is a concept that you have to be able to recognize and talk about with people. Do you believe in equality or do you believe in equity? Because that's going to shape the way a family manages their resources. Parsimony. Yeah, let's do this real quick. I love the idea of parsimony, Occam's razor, which basically says, live simply. Reject the ideas behind consumerism. Just because you can buy something, don't buy it if you don't need it. Buy what you need and nothing more. Buy what you like, not what other people say you should like. So many times food gets wasted because we buy it thinking like, oh, this is new, this looks good, and it's gross. So we reject that. We reject the marketers of the world, and we make our own decisions as much as possible, even though that's not actually possible. But basically, live simply. Everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. If you live your life simply, you're very happy with your life. If you have high expectations and really complicated things in your life is really complicated. So this is behind the whole minimalist movement, which again, we'll talk about in more detail later. But basically, it's being happy with what you have and putting the rest in the bank. So that's my challenge for you. Thursday, you have a quiz, so we're not meeting in person. But think about that over the next week. Like, what are some things you could do to simplify your life in some way? Maybe that means saying no to something someone wants you to do. Maybe it means not buying something. Whatever it is, think about how you could live more simply. And then we'll talk about that next Tuesday. Have a good week. Good luck on your quiz.